Now, while the country gears up for local government elections, questions are also being asked about school governing body elections under COVID-19 conditions. So in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, what effect would attempt at facilitating the process of elections entail under COVID-19 induced conditions? Dr. Nqobile Zulu, who's a research manager in studies in poverty and inequality, joins me now. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News this evening. So the South African Schools Act states that a school governing board must be elected every 3 years. Do we have any idea of how COVID-19 has impacted that process across South Africa?
Thank you. One of the key tragedies of COVID, it's become a situation where it is the richer who have access to all of this, whether we talk of medication, we talk of, but when we focus on the issue of education, because now we moved the issue of elections from saying, okay, we cannot have a day when people can gather together and then have elections. Then you are going to have elections on a particular time or right through the day in order to give access to and cater for the numbers. It has made it, again, an issue for the privileged, where the privileged are the ones who can be able to leave work at any time if they work, or if they own companies, they can leave at their own time, go to the schools and have elections. They can be the ones who are elected into the school governing boards. But what about the majority, the masses who work for somebody, who have to earn a living or who run their own small business, and they cannot afford to live an hour or two to go and vote in that. So in that instance, who are we then voting for? Who then, because when you look at SGP elections, the decisions that come out of the SGP elections, things like issues of school fees, for example, they're going to be decided by the SGP. And it is in those instances where then the majority are left disenfranchised in one sense.
All right, I guess we should step back and discuss the role of SGBs and their importance in a school and societal setting.
The role of SGBs particularly is to help the parents with the governing of the school. They give parents access to governance and also the ability to make decisions over the running of their schools, over how their teachers look up to their children, how the resources are spent within the schools, how the school fees is decided. So within that, this, in one sense, also speaks to the elections that we're coming to. So it's a practice run for the bigger picture that is local and national. But it starts somewhere, it starts with the school system, how that is run, how that is affected, who is elected into that system. So if then that system in itself is faulty, it then speaks volume to the other bigger systems that we have. Because when we talk of governance, we need to talk of participation. And we need to talk of fair, equal participation. That is not based on resource ability. That is not based on the ability to afford to drive to school, for example, during the day and make a vote and then go back to work or wherever you are. So for a parent who works for somebody, or for a parent who's in informal economy, then that then disenfranchises them. So it then speaks to how then do we make the system fair? How do we make the system all-embracing for everyone?
Mm-hmm. So you've spoken about the challenges when you need to physically be there, and then you've also written about the challenges of electing somebody perhaps online, on Zoom, saying it wouldn't be perhaps a reasonable or a fair thing to do as well. So there's two sets of unfairness. What's the solution?
There are no easy fixes. There are no easy quick fixes, to be honest with you. Partly because we need to, starting with the school systems themselves, to whether we could be talking about giving a quota, to be able to say, okay, let me give you a simple example. Look at the structure of that school governing board. Look at the people that are elected. If we're talking of former Model C schools, for example, the people that are elected will be mostly male. If it's a school that former Model C school that still has that is a majority of different people of all races, the majority of people that are going to be elected will be men, white, middle-aged. People have met it, literally. Where are the younger people? Where are the young people that are upcoming? The first timers who have their first kids at that primary school, for example, who have these fresh ideas, who have these new ideas. They are not there because they are the people who are busy striving to make a living, busy striving to make a career where they are at, right? So if we were to have a quota system for that and say, okay, for every election, let's say women, let's say 45% should be women. If there are no women candidates, then let's try to push for having women. Then we're going to have a fair representation. And then within those kind of systems, let's also, if it means talking racial quotas, then let's have those racial quotas. Because then we will be able to create that rainbow nation that we've always talked about. Because if we don't, then we're discriminating via resources. And discriminating via resources, again, transcends down and then speaks to issues of race. And unfortunately, it's the politics of this country. Whether we're talking of school governing elections, whether we're talking of the last elections that the DA held, for example, in KwaZulu-Natal, where they were held electronically. Again, one could look at that and make a criticism of that, the fairness of that. So it's a difficult scenario, but it starts with encouraging people to participate, with encouraging these young parents, first-timers particularly. My focus is much more on these first-time parents who have their first child in primary school. And it starts from there, because once we encourage these parents, then we have a longer group of people that can last longer in the school system. We have a number of other kids that are going to come up and have ideas that they can use and build to improve the school situation. But if we have the same people always being elected all the time, then we are creating a situation where some people are disenfranchised. Some ideas are not heard, literally, because they are not there in the top echelons of the school governance system. They're not there in the authority-making structure of the system. They're not there in the process that engages behind the scenes and then comes to the old parents and says, okay, this is what we're talking about in terms of our school fees. We're raising the school fees in terms of this percentage. Okay, well, my focus here is mostly on the Motel C type of schools, where despite the fact that they might be government schools, the focus is, okay, the range of private schools, it's this is how much they raise their private, their fees. So we should be sticking to this. So again, if you see, that then in its own disenfranchises the other parents. And so the fees is raised to say, okay, we're meeting the private schools. But are we looking at the majority of the parents that are represented in that school?
All right, Dr. Nqobile Zulu, thanks so much for your time on The Full View this evening.